Hello class. In this video I want to continue with certain landscape features like I've done in the past, where I can create a sort of fully controlled object in Illustrator fully with colors and make it work sort of more towards abstract stylized drawing. And so in this case I'm working with bushes, which could also be used to actually enhance other things like trees or whatnot as well. And I know up on the screen it doesn't look like much because it's just sort of taken out of context, but it really is just a segment of very texturized greens and colors that can enhance this. And so I'm going to jump over to this drawing really quick where I used it for the first time along with many other things. So we can see some of that technique back here and up front and back in this corner to sort of give, this is a very stylized and color drawing as well, so we don't see the greens, but we can see the texture that it gives to this and really the control of color that you can get over it. I also used it up in here, like on this tree, to enhance the pine tree thing that I've done in the past, to enhance it with a certain status of color and even just some detailing just for color work on these trees as well. So it can be used in a lot of settings, and in fact, and I might show this in a follow-up video, but I actually used the exact same thing to help produce this cloud effect that we see in this drawing as well. Oops, that's the wrong thing here. So going back to Illustrator to show how to do this, each color here is its own objects. Pretty simple. I just quickly drew a line. I'll show you, and in each one has the exact same setting. So let me start by just showing you a rectangle. You usually want to use lines, and obviously a bush isn't a rectangle like this, but just for starters, let's go to rectangle, and let me there's going to be several effects on here, so I'm going to select it and got my stroke, got 1 point. I'm going to apply a couple roughens. So I'm going to go to Effect, Distort, Transform, Roughen, and I will do my first one. I'm going to do 0.84%. I've already done this on the other one, so I know what they are. The numbers actually might very much change on your drawing. It has to do with the size of your drawing and various other things. But these are the numbers I'm going to use for starters. I'm going to go to smooth, and I'll say OK. And we can see that just adds a little bit of crinkliness to the drawing there. And the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to apply roughen again. So I'm going to go to Effects, Distort, Transform, Roughen. This is a great way that I do a lot of organic stuff, is by doing 2 roughens. So I'm going to do 0.5%. up there, and this one's going to be 100, and smooth again. We'll say OK. We can see that sort of added another level of sort of roughness to this object here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply tweak, which further just sort of enhances the organicness of this. So I'm going to go to Distort, Transform. I'm going to go to Tweak, and I'm going to do 16.35 and 18.06. I'm going to do absolute on that one, and make sure those are checked and say OK. And we can see that that starts to really explode this into a bunch of branches or whatever that you think they might be. Now the one thing that I did on top of this is I came over and I preloaded this in, but I did dashed lines here so that when that renders they sort of get a dashed effect. They aren't, if I zoom in, we can see they sort of become like leaves or whatever of the bush that they might be, just by creating little dots. It's so small, like you don't necessarily need a leaf shape like we might when we're rendering a tree, but it gives that sort of textural quality you need when you sort of zoom in. And so we can see here, I didn't want to type this all in, but you can read, I just did sort of a random setting of dashes and dots based on 1 point, which was the thickness of my line. So I started sort of with an equal thickness to a dash and then made it smaller and bigger and just gave it semi-random sizes in there. So you can read those up there on screen, but again, you can play with all that stuff as you need. And then the last thing I did to do this is I just softened it all by using feather. So you go to Stylize Feather, and I think I did 1.44 point for that, but again, that's going to be all based on size as well of your drawing. So I'll say OK. And so then it produces this effect here. right? And so this is one layer of what this bush is. There's just several layers here. And so once you've sort of accommodated that, you can pull this over into your graphic styles for use. And then it's just a matter of using them with different colors. So I'm going to delete this rectangle because a rectangle, of course, doesn't look like a bush, but to sort of create something like this, or the bushes and effects that I did here on this completed drawing, all I actually used was my pencil tool. So right here, I just created a pencil and I just gave it a little squiggly, sort of something like that, and then, you know, I should actually start with you want to start with a darker color as the base. So actually I have a preloaded darker color in there. It's a little dark. I might make that a little bit greener, but whatever the color you need to be. So you notice my other drawing I was using, it was a very dark color intentionally. It wasn't the greens. So, you know, I'd do a little bit of scribbling like that. I'd come on top, do another set of scribbles, set the color to something lighter. I might even darken this up just a bit to get a few levels of coloration in here, as I have on the one over there. Just move things around as needed. Sort of do it again a third time, maybe a little less, as each layer wants to be able to see what's happening through each layer, and stretch this out a little bit to cover the whole drawing. And then you could basically call that the bush as is. Or what I did over here is I added a fourth level of color to make like flowers or something like this. If these were plants, you do the exact same thing, use the exact same thing. I'm just going to draw something on there, set it to my style, but change the color to something that might look like a plant. So I have yellow right there, but maybe I want to do something more magenta-ish for a bigger pop, for example, just like that, right? And so now it looks like flowers. And so again, this is a texture that can be used to create any sort of abstract like drawing without over realizing it. I know when you do things in Photoshop with plants or things, if you're putting them in a 3D modeler or whatever the case may be, they tend to be repetitive. They don't look quite real. Yet they are meant to look real, and it's just not quite right. And so when I'm drawing, I like to say, hey, just draw it yourself, create a style to the drawing, and this gives you lots of flexibility. Just that rough and tweak as the main elements with the dashes and the feathers to just soften it up a little bit really allows you to make a textured like brush that you just easily throw on a pencil. And I'm just using a mouse. I'm not using a stylus or anything. I don't have that equipment. You just use a mouse. You just draw a slight curvy line. You set it, and boom, you got something that looks real interesting. So so there you go. That's how you make a bush. What I'll actually show you is I'm going to show how to use this as clouds also, because I think that's interesting. But I've literally did pretty much the same exact thing for it to be used for clouds, which is a great technique. So maybe you'll watch that video too. I'll see you there.